Good evening. Welcome to QUT Web News. The Queensland Premier Anna Bligh says the Occupy Brisbane protesters are no longer welcome in the central business district and should move on. This morning, police forcibly removed the protesters from Queen's Park, but the group has now moved to another inner-city location.
Early this morning, police ordered the protesters to move on and then fenced off Queen's Park, where the group had set up their latest camp. One protester was arrested for assaulting a police officer.
Unfortunately, negotiations broke down yet again, and police had to forcibly remove 20 people from the area.
As the group packed their gear, many were keen to explain why they are protesting.
The gap between rich and poor is just getting greater and greater and greater. We don't see it here in Australia yet, but it's happening in Europe, in America.
We're going against corporate greed, Anna Bligh and many others who wish to be greedy and look after themselves and not the poor people or the common person.
Others have specific complaints about life in Queensland.
I've been homeless for the last maybe 6 years, and I've found it difficult to get accommodation, jobs, food, clothing, everything, because so many people at the top are greedy with all their money.
The Premier Anna Bligh says the Occupy protesters are no longer welcome in the CBD.
Really, it's probably time for them to be moving on and out of the city.
But the group have ignored the Premier's words and have decided to march to a new site in the inner city.
Human, they're not corporate greed.
We are the 99%.
Human, they're not corporate greed.
We are the 99%.
The march brought some bemused looks from passers-by as the group headed for King George Square and their new occupation site.
Well, it's not exactly clear what the Occupy Brisbane movement would demand from any potential negotiations. What is clear is that this movement is committed to occupying this space for as long as they can. Jessica Sire, QUT News.
The Queensland Ombudsman says there has been systematic failures in several government departments in dealing with the Hendra Virus outbreaks between 2006 and 2009. One of the key recommendations of the Ombudsman's report is for a review of state laws to see whether they're adequate to control future outbreaks of the virus.
In the 3 years prior to 2009, 18 horses and 2 vets were identified with Hendra and died after contracting the virus. The Ombudsman's report identifies a range of outdated, inconsistent policies and procedures, as well as dated, overlapping legislation. These led to problems in quarantine practices during that period. The report also says Queensland primary industries and fisheries staff imposed quarantines contrary to law and were unsure about the use of adequate protective equipment. It says communication between vets and horse owners was inadequate and that training and resources for agency staff, contractors and property owners were insufficient. The Ombudsman acknowledges that progress has been made in recent years, but says more work needs to be done. The government agrees.
Much of the issues he were looking into are dated. They're a couple of years old and the government's response has moved significantly in that time. Nevertheless, the Ombudsman is there to make sure that where we can learn, we learn.
The Queensland Horse Council President backs up the government's claims.
Probably 2009 onwards, the education campaign with the vets, EVA and Horse Council and government certainly forged ahead and everybody became much more aware.
But the Liberal National Party isn't convinced.
The government has failed to properly manage these issues. It hasn't actually learnt the lessons of several years ago, nor has it communicated properly with the community the threats of this disease.
13 Hendra-infected horses have died or been put down in Queensland this year. In New South Wales, 10 horses have died from the disease. The state government must now decide its response to the 74 recommendations for change. Sonia Harris, QUT News.
The Australian Medical Association says public hospitals around the country are going backwards despite extra funding. According to the AMA's annual report card, hospitals in every state, including Queensland, are failing to meet key benchmarks.
The AMA's annual report card has found there's been little improvement in public hospital capacity and performance across Australia between 2009 to 2010. The The president of the AMA says hospitals across the country are struggling to meet demand and do not have the capacity to cope with the strain of Australia's ageing population. That's despite an additional $5.3 billion in funding over the same period.
It's very important that we actually see that funding actually gets delivered to the bedside, to the patients who need the care in our country.
Queensland has scored a better mark than other states, but the AMA fears the results could be distorted by what it calls hidden waiting times.
We want to know how much time it takes between the time a doctor, a GP, sees a patient and that patient gets surgery.
But Queensland Health has labelled the report dated and says it is based on old information.
Much more current information is released by Queensland Health continuously.
The AMA judges hospitals across 3 categories: bed numbers and occupancy rates, emergency department and elective surgery waiting times. They say they're disappointed with the results in all 3.
But the AMA says it's not all bad news. There have been welcome increases in the rate of tissue and organ donation. Amy Partington, QUT News.
Australian travellers will soon have the choice of another budget airline as Air Australia prepares to launch its new service. The launch coincides with the start of an airline price war as Virgin Australia moves to take advantage of the recent turmoil in Qantas.
Air Australia is yet to take to the skies. It has its planes ready with its new Aussie colours and iconic logo. And the staff are also ready and today showed off their new outfits. The hard part is to come as the new budget airline tries to break into the increasingly competitive Australian airline market.
We know it's a very turbulent and competitive environment.
Air Australia says it will start by servicing the main domestic hubs of Brisbane, Melbourne and Perth. It will also fly to China, Thailand and Indonesia.
It's a low-cost carrier operating on those niche markets which will see choice and fresh back into the aviation market in Australia.
The airline is to be based in Queensland, a move that's welcomed by the Queensland Government.
40% of the top 20 airports, the busiest airports in Australia, are in Queensland because the distances are so great.
As Air Australia prepares to lure passengers to its new service, there is an escalating price war as Virgin Australia moves to take advantage of the recent turmoil at Qantas. It's no surprise that passengers here at Brisbane Airport are welcoming increased competition within the Australian airline industry and the lower fares it should lead to.
I always look forward to lower prices.
If they keep fighting price wars, it makes it beneficial for us regional people.
Air Australia plans to put its first planes in the air on November the 15th. Aaron Smith, QUT News.
Suncorp Insurance has released a report identifying the top 10 Brisbane suburbs worst affected by the January floods. While the report reveals the average cost per suburb of personal insurance claims, many homes across Brisbane are still a long way from removing the scars left by the raging Brisbane River.
The Suncorp report identifies the 10 Brisbane suburbs that recorded the highest average insurance claims for damage done by the January floods. Suncorp says it has processed more than 8,200 claims throughout Brisbane, with a total cost of more than $206 million. The report shows each of the suburbs in the top 10 were along or close to the bends of the Brisbane River.
Following the processing of the majority of claims, we now have a very clear picture of the individual property losses that were experienced. We've assessed the average claims cost across the state and identified Queensland's hardest hit suburbs.
With Urongapilli topping the list with an average claim of over $200,000, the personal cost for families still waiting for their insurance payments is difficult to measure. Fig Tree Pocket, Rocklea and Chelmer are all in the top 5 suburbs with the greatest average claims. Residents still have vivid memories of how close the river came to destroying their homes.
Probably about this high.
In Fairfield, real estate agencies say property values have dropped significantly since the floods.
People may want to buy the property, but if it has been flood affected, the banks will not lend against it at the same ratio they would with a non-flood affected property. So in effect, what you're doing is you have to have at least 40% deposit.
While Suncorp and other insurers are still processing claims, rebuilding hasn't even started at many properties in some of the worst hit suburbs. The houses remain as they were when the floodwaters receded. Matt Warren, QUT News.
And now to sport. It's been a bittersweet day for pro surfer Kelly Slater, who's won his record 11th World Surfing title on the anniversary of the death of his close friend Andy Irons.
Going into the third heat at Ocean Beach in San Francisco, Kelly Slater was trailing Australian Dan Ross. But the world champion dug deep and made surfing history, clinching his first world title in mainland America at the tour's penultimate event of the year. Today's win makes Slater both the youngest, at 20, and the oldest, at 39, to win the world title.
What's the chances I'd do this on the anniversary of, unfortunately, Andy passing away? And it's, in a way, it makes it obviously a lot more special for me.
Another sporting legend hopes to make headlines tomorrow. Swimming champion Ian Thorpe is preparing his competitive comeback after a 5-year retirement. He'll be competing at the World Cup Short Course Swimming Championships in Singapore. But don't expect to see him race over the longer distances. Thorpe plans to compete in just the 100-metre individual medley and the 100-metre butterfly. And in league news, Australia's Billy Slater has won his second International Player of the Year award in London overnight. Australia swept the awards. Slater, who plays for the Melbourne Storm, also won this year's Dally M medal. Michelle Harris, QUT News.
The Thoroughbreds were taking a back seat at Oaks Ladies' Day today, with Hollywood stars winning the fashion stakes and the hearts of a local sporting legend. Among the celebrities at Flemington, Hollywood legend Joan Collins shared a few words of wisdom for younger ladies at the track. She told them that real glamour takes effort, makeup and a little bit of mystery. There was no mystery for Liz Hurley, however. She stayed up close and personal with fiancé Shane Warne. Sarah Jessica Parker added yet another shot of glamour to the biggest fashion day of the Spring Racing Carnival. She presented the trophy to the owners of Machine, the winner of this year's $1 million Crown Oaks.
Time now for a look at the weather. Brisbane had a warm day with a top of 29, while around the southeast, Ipswich had a hot day at 32. The Gold Coast saw a top of 30 and Toowoomba had a top of 27. Turning our attention to our sky cam, we can see Brisbane had a lovely sunny November day. That clear blue sky hung around for most of the day with only a few clouds in the afternoon. Around the nation tomorrow, Perth and Darwin can expect thunderstorms. Canberra can expect a mostly sunny day with a top of 19 and Melbourne can expect some rain. The forecast for Queensland now. Longreach and Mount Isa can expect late thunderstorms, but the east coast will be mostly fine and sunny. Rockhampton will see a top of 32, while Brisbane may get some rain with a top of 25. That brings you up to date with the weather.
And that's all the news we have for now.
We'll be back tomorrow with more QUT News. Goodbye.
Goodbye.